worked this blaze near Big Timber, Montana. In the blink of an eye, just fire everywhere. And then, charging out of these flames, comes this bear on fire. It was the most beautiful and terrible thing I've ever seen.
I heard you guys had some slots available.
What are you doing here?
I just had a daughter, and I just really want to give her what I never had. If you give me a chance, I won't let you down.
You know the difference between Type 2 crew and Hotshots?
Yes, sir. Hotshots are on the front line, and they get to engage the fire directly.
You guys are Type 2, so why don't you do what you do best? Stay in the back and mop up our shit.
You want to talk about it? Or you want to do your John Wayne thing?
I've been training for over 4 years. We got all our hours, all our qualifications. Sooner or later, fire's gonna come knocking in our hometown. But until we're certified, my crew won't even be able to set foot on the line.
Doing something that's never been done before takes time.
It's not easy sharing your man with the fire.
I want y'all to breathe in this beautiful vista, because once you're Hotshots, you're never gonna be able to look out into the wild, see that pure beauty again.
Granite Mountain operations. Is everything okay?
Yarnell, Granite Mountain Hotshots. Our escape plan has been cut off.
If the fire gets past our line, it goes to our town.
Okay, we're working our way around there.
No matter what you hear,
We've got several aircraft coming to you.
no matter what's going on,
We can't go back up there.
stay together.
Tell me when you hear the aircraft, okay?
Look out for each other, because you're a family. No one could be prouder of his boys than I am of you guys.
Guys, thank you so much for being here. Guys, you must be over the moon. You made a great movie. Congratulations. You made a really great, accessible, wonderful film. It's fantastic. Congratulations. Brennan, you must be, I mean, what is that like for you? One, to say, okay, let's make a movie about this thing that happened in my life, but then to see the movie. What has this process been like for you?
It's been a very cathartic process, and being able to work with such a great cast and director and production, it's so honoring to be able to see my brother's story come back to life and be on the forefront of people's minds, and it's really just honoring to be a part of.
Now, this happened 4 years ago, the incident in the fire. For you, I mean, I think a lot of people would say, you know, does it feel like you're reliving this? But there's a wonderful quote by you at the end of the film about what it's been like to sort of tell this story and turn their story, instead of guilt, into turning them into heroes. Does it feel like the movie has done that for you?
Yeah, it's done a phenomenal job at capturing who my brothers were and what this job is about, and they've given such great insight and depth into the wildfire community. It's tremendously authentic, accurate, and a phenomenal portrayal. You know, there's some amazing scenes in there that just have blown my mind, and to see on a big screen is just touching.
Now, Josh, you play a man who was the superintendent of the Granite Mountain Hotshots, right?
Eric Marsh.
Yeah, Eric Marsh, and he worked really hard to sort of get them certified, right, as a group that could fight the fire on the front line. And Jennifer, you play his wife. Did you guys meet with his wife and family members and some of the people and talk to them?
Yeah, I did. I play Amanda Marsh in the film, and I was privileged enough to be able to spend time with Amanda. I spoke to her before we went out to Santa Fe, where we were shooting, over the phone, and then she was in Santa Fe during pre-production and during some of the filming. She was really generous with me, with her time and her stories and photographs and her cowboy boots. She spoke with me and came riding with me. She was really very, very forthcoming and very brave, I thought, and really honest with her story.
Josh, what about you playing Eric Marsh? What was it like playing this true-to-life character who passed away?
I mean, I think playing any firefighter is daunting, you know, and you're around these guys. I was very fortunate to have known a lot of firefighters in the last 30 years. I was a volunteer firefighter outside of Tucson, Arizona for a few years. So I just like the community. It's an extremely kind of individually misfit, you know, inappropriate community who I'm very attracted to. And, you know, together they're able to just kind of switch. They have the ability to switch and go into this mode of being able to go toward very unpredictable danger and extreme peril in order to, you know, bring some kind of safety to their communities. And it takes a certain kind of person. And I just, it was nice because when I met Joe, you know, I had more reticence than anything, not about Joe, but just about the idea of doing this. I knew a guy who was my chief, who is an incident commander now, and he knew Eric, and he was at that funeral. So I was very aware of that whole time and what had happened and the tragedy. And if you're not sensitive, and if you're not doing it with people who are sensitive about it, it could turn out really sensationalized and awful. And so when I got together with Joe, and then he started choosing people that was right for this, I think we were all very hard on each other to be as kind of stripped down and raw as possible and get all that actor out of us. And,
what does that mean, get the actor?
I mean,
out of you?
whatever sense of vanity that you can't help but bring to any role. I think an actor just kind of not embodies that, but they carry that with them. I think it's just something that exists for any actor. It's just the nature of what it is that we do.
Your life is spent being seen. How can it not?
Yeah, and what's right for a scene, and how can I, you know, how am I gonna do the best that I can do? And when you're playing real life people, which I've done a few times, there's something nice about getting over yourself and getting into those people. Like with Amanda, I mean, she's like a little sister to me now. I talk to her every day. You know, she's, you know, it's familial at this point. And, you know, it was great being around her for her to be able to say, that's not like him at all. Or, you know what I mean? It gets more brutal and it gets more stripped down. And that I think was appropriate for us to be able to earn the spirit of these guys. I don't think we'll ever be these guys or even close to it, but I think it was really to find the spirit of these people.
And Miles, what about you? You play Brendan in the film. I'd imagine he's a big part of the movie and was probably there a little bit. What kind of conversations did you have?
Yeah, I guess before I met Brendan, I read his book, and I think I had watched a lot of interviews about him. But you know, and when I met Brendan, the incident had only happened a couple of years prior, and you know, I knew I was very sensitive to that. And look, yeah, I'm trying to. You know, I'm also trying to figure out, you know, who he was kind of before, you know, all this stuff, and that's, you know, it's impossible to find that when, you know, when you're talking to him. That's absolutely who, you know, Brendan is. But yeah, Brendan was a wonderful, you know, resource. I think that all of us benefited from having him there, and you know, even our technical advisor Pat McCarty, he was a Granite Mountain Hotshot, and they brought in. You know, and then his brother, a guy who had just left the crew a couple weeks before it happened, and all those guys were there for the boot camp. And kind of what Josh said, you know, everybody just bought into it. And for me to have Brendan to just kind of bounce things off of, it was really, I think we all benefited from it. And he's opened himself up to this whole process. I think it would have felt weird if he was like very guarded or felt like we were kind of, you know, manipulating his story and, you know, Hollywoodizing it up. And you know, even Joe, right from the beginning, we're doing camera tests, and I've never had that experience to where he's like, you know, because, you know, the guys would be chewing or this and that. So Joe, right from the camera test, he's like, more dirt, you know, put gum in your mouth to, you know, make like you look like you have something right there. And it was, yeah, we wanted to
you
make
guys
it
are covered in
soot
for the majority of the movie. Yeah.
It's the soot movie.
Yeah.
That's actually the tagline somewhere, I think. Brendan, you know, you are incredibly open to the story because your character in the movie, that is you, your first act is like a part of your life that you probably, you know, don't want to remember too much. What was it like what's it like exposing that to the world?
I think it's such a great opportunity to shed light on who my brothers were and what they've done for me, and just to kind of give a little bit of hope to people right now. You know, addiction is an epidemic in our country, and to be able to show young men and women, and actually of all ages, that you can come through and you can persevere with great help and great sense of community like I had. You know, was super fortunate to not open up and to not be able to go into those depths. Would have really not done my brothers justice with how much they've done for me, and to be able to have, you know, someone like Miles and Joe and Josh and Jennifer and Taylor and Badge to, they just took it so personal, you know, the sense of responsibility that I felt from them just made it that much easier. It wasn't like an interview, it was just having a conversation, and it just led to places of great times, you know, my daughter being born, becoming a hotshot, and then some of the tougher times too, but they did a phenomenal job and really, you know, just like I said, making it a huge responsibility.
It's very clear that you guys took it personal making the film as well, because the film is about these people. It's not about the fires. The fires are there, but it's about the people who were fighting them, which is something that I thought was very surprising and beautiful. I think most people and most studios would want to go into making a movie that's like, you know, more action, more firefighting, but the action in this movie is really the drama between the characters and what they're going through. Joseph, can you talk about that? Can you talk about developing the story and sort of finding the drama rather than sort of just going after the fires?
Yeah, well, that made it a hard movie to get made because of just what you talked about.
It's also different for you as a director, I mean, coming off of the sort of visual effects spectaculars, which are wonderful, of your last two films.
Yeah, well, that's a big reason why I would think I was drawn to it. I wanted to do something totally different, and when I read a very early draft of this script, I was just blown away in the story of the relationship between Eric Marsh and Brendan, and what Eric does for Brendan in this story I found just to kind of represent the best of who we can be. I found it very inspiring. I found the whole story very educational, just because I was almost embarrassed by the fact I didn't know anything about wildland firefighting. Like most people, I think I assume that these are the same guys that you see riding around in trucks in your cities, but it's a totally different job, and it just felt like it was a story that could really make a difference. And it was a story that had to be told, and so I feel very grateful. I think we all do, that we got a chance to tell it.
Did you have any?
It's also, sorry to interrupt, but it's also, you know, what Joe did was really find a balance between wildland firefighting and the family's life. You know, I mean, there was a big thing with what Jennifer did in being somebody who's living at home and kind of figuring out her life as a married but sort of single person, while these guys are off, you know, living this extreme life, you know, very unnatural, extreme situations, and then you go home and you have to reintegrate, and it's almost impossible. So this kind of flawed relationships and trying to figure out how to get through the tensions in order to kind of, you know, reconnect and reincorporate and find some happy medium and compromise. I think in the people that have seen the film have really, more than I thought that they would, reacted to that, where pretty much anybody can identify with marital problems, you know. So it's really an interesting balance between the two, because it's not just, like you said, an action film about firefighting.
Well, it's really a character study about your two characters in a lot of ways, and the way that the movie really, the screenplay teases out these backstories about you until, it's not really till the end of the film where we have hints of what's going on with the two of you and your backstory. It's not really towards the end that we see, oh, they have these issues, and these are the issues that they had prior, and this is why maybe he's a firefighter, rather than most movies would drop all those things in at the top to sort of give you some sort of three-dimensional character at that moment and then put him in a fire, you know?
Yeah, you really get to know these characters, and you really spend a lot of time. There's so much emphasis put on the 19 dying at the end, obviously, and that's a tragedy that we know and we can never truly understand, but we're affected by watching the movie. But really, you're spending 2 hours getting to know these people, and it's a wild, you know, they're incredible people to get to know, and you feel that throughout the movie, you know. And interestingly enough, even with what happens at the end, you have a lot of people watching this movie going, I want to be a firefighter, you know.
Yeah, well, there's still a lot of hope at the end of the film. The spirit of their lives carries through. James, or Badge, should I call you, he called you Badge. Can I?
Jimmy Bobby.
Jim, you play the captain of the Granite Mountain Hotshots, who was one of the 19 that passed away. What sort of work did you do? What was it like for you hanging out with these families and getting to know, I mean, his family, he had a couple kids as well.
Yeah, Jesse Steed left a wife and 2 children behind. And, you know, I think for all of us, this has just been, how do I say, it's a very humbling process, because we've gotten to know the family members and everyone. You know, the Yarnell Hill fire was in 2013. That wasn't very long ago, so everyone's at different stages of the grieving process. And I'll just say, my experience was his wife would talk to me on the phone, but she asked for space. And So we talked beforehand on the phone. She was very giving and forthright. And then as filming is going on, family members would come to set and visit when they felt it was the right time. And she surprised me on the second to last day of filming, and she came. And she said she'd heard that this was a cathartic process for other family members who have come. And then I got to meet her children. I got to meet Jesse's kids for the first time this summer. And I've never experienced anything like this in my filmmaking career. I don't think anything will be like this again. I'm incredibly humbled and proud to have worked on this with everyone here.
How do you guys get over, or maybe you don't, the weight of while you're filming? Because so often when you're acting on a set in front of a camera, you have to sort of shed a lot of stuff just so you can create and, you know, be in a comfortable space. Do you need to shed a lot of the weight of this story when you're doing that, or do you try to hold it with you?
This was also a lot of fun. I mean, I mean, you guys can wrap on that.
I'm glad you're going into that because it was about shedding weight. And I think Taylor and I would talk about this because the guy I played, Jesse Steed, was a fun-loving guy. He wasn't carrying personal weight. I mean, I'm an actor, man. I carry some weight sometimes, you know? And like this process was about getting rid of that, you know? And
well, I think, you know, it's a beautiful thing to explore, you know? That's the question of, you know, obviously it's a heightened responsibility that we take on, and you can be buckled by that or you can really be empowered by that. And I think that's what we celebrated through this process of the training camp, obviously, but most importantly, dealing with the families, you know, hanging out with Brendan and laughing. And I would say it took about 22 seconds before we started ribbing each other. You know what I mean? Like, it's that's the process that you live for as an actor, to be a part of these movies and, you know, obviously the cast, but these stories, you know, it's a beautiful process in that sense.
Taylor, I've always loved you as an actor. This is the first time I've really seen you as kind of comic relief a lot of the times in the scenes, and you're hilarious. I actually want to see you do some sort of buddy cop comedy in the future. There it is.
It's just, I think the more I got into Mac, the more I learned and hanging out with Brendan, the more you studied him, the more I hung out with his dad. It was just like the stories that I was getting at dinner from his dad and Brendan, and you even go onto Mac's Instagram of just how much he would rip Donut, and just, it was just, I just loved it. I really did, and it was so much fun. And I mean, there's times that Miles and I, there's this baby scene that's just, it's kind of out of control.
It's wonderful. I love that the film suddenly drops into this like 3 men in a baby sequence or 2 men in a baby. It's great.
Director's cut of that scene, that's an hour long.
That's 41 minutes of us just improvising, but I mean, we literally, it was hard to, keep a straight face. We had to go single cam at one point just because we're trying to make each other break the whole time, you know, so.
And the fake baby that we're using, like every once in a while his eyes would just do something very demonic, and it's just like, all right, hold on a second.
But there's some genuine beats that we had that with the real kid that was just spot on, that was.
Yeah, the kid kind of steals the scene in certain points.
No,
yeah,
Joe,
the baby
no
is amazing.
The kid kind of hated you, didn't it? I mean, the kid.
Joseph, how did you know that the film in this moment could sort of drop into this sentimental comedic scene between these two guys trying to figure out how to like handle a child for an evening?
That's all, you know, taken from Brendan's own stories. I mean, it's like you couldn't write this story if you tried. I mean, I was really just amazed by Brendan's story and the fact that Chris McKenzie, known as the gatekeeper of the Granite Mountain Hotshots, who couldn't be tougher on Brendan when he joined, to find out that they became best friends, moved in together, and ended up, you know, one night having to take care of a sick infant. To me, it's an incredible story, and just really sums up the heart of this film, which is all about brotherhood and coming together and supporting each other, and that's really what the Hotshots were all about.
What was it like for you as a director to go into directing these sort of small, dramatic, sometimes comedic scenes versus some of the scenes that you had been doing previously with, Tron or, Oblivion?
It was very refreshing, you know, on those big science fiction films, you've got so many things, there's a world you're building, there's so many, you know, especially with Tron, just so much kind of technical stuff you're trying to balance. With this movie, being able to kind of strip it down and really just be a director in kind of the purest sense with a script and an incredible, you know, cast was I had a lot of fun, and just couldn't be prouder of the job they did.
When you set out to cast, were you trying to cast what kind of actors were you trying to cast? I mean, obviously the best, but
I mean,
this is my fault. This is my fault. I didn't have a next question. I'm percolating. I'm percolating.
Listen, this story was so special. I knew that it was all about just getting the best actors I could. I mean, it was like a dream. You have your dream list, and
did you feel like you were directing different kinds of scenes? I mean, in sci-fi, it's a lot of exposition to sort of get you to the next big moment. With this, it is a lot of human, dramatic moments between people.
Yeah, which is fun. It's letting actors do their thing. Trying not to get in the way, trying not to over-direct, casting it correctly, having a great script, making sure that you're all on the same page before you get on the set that day. But at that point, sometimes the smart thing to do is to just step back and let it happen.
What does over-direct look like?
I'd say
I'll move off of you in a second.
Okay.
Sorry.
I mean, I didn't have, in this movie, like I said, you don't have to. There's not a lot. I wanted to make sure, we did meetings before, we had a lot of discussions, but on the day, I wanted it to be as natural and as possible. So when you're working with actors of this caliber, the job becomes a lot easier. I think the most important thing a director can do once you've got a great script is cast the movie. And if you get those two things right, you've set yourself up to maybe achieve something great. At least the possibility is there. And then you just need a little bit of that movie alchemy, whatever that is, that mix of things that you never know exactly what's going to happen when you put a group of actors together. In this case, there was just this amazing kind of mixture, and we felt it on set. Again, you don't know if it's going to translate once you get in the editing room, but I feel like this is one of those movies where it did, and I'm just so grateful it happened on this story, because this is one that's
we're
so
still
important.
communicating now. Like most movies, you kind of create this familial bubble, and then you move on to the next movie, and you lose contact with people, and then you see them 10 years later if you've been doing this long enough, and it's all wonderful, and hey, how are you, and it's great to see you again, and you have that connection from before, whereas this movie, I think, is one of the few movies, if not maybe the only movie I've done, where we have a text thread that's still going. Somebody's writing on it every day, extremely inappropriate things. And
Brendan, are you on this text thread?
Yeah, it gets out of hand sometimes. So
not sometimes, all the time.
Who's the worst on it?
Kitsch, for sure.
Yeah.
Kitsch. Just right under the bus there. That was easy for him to say too.
Can I ask
Notice
for a
that
detailed
three of us said it at the same time, so it wasn't really.
a detailed Kitsch text? What
You don't want to know, man.
Bro,
not on camera. Not on camera. No means no.
Jennifer, your in most movies, and I hate to compare things to most movies, but you would be the woman who's at home. When are you coming home? On the phone, getting the call, and that's really the character's relegated to that. I think a lot of times your character is fully developed, and the things that she is nervous or upset about really become the thrust of your relationship with Eric and his relationship with you and his whole storyline for the most part. What was it like getting that character versus a lot of the scripts that I'm sure you receive?
Yeah, I really appreciated that in the story, and I thought it was really, I thought it was a really good choice, because I thought it really lent, it really grounded and gave context to what they accomplished and what they went out and did, to understand the cost, the cost, what they were leaving at home, what they were leaving behind, and the complications that come from that kind of a job and that kind of an endeavor. And I thought it was really bold of Eric, the writer, and of Joe to let the scenes be messy in that way, and let the emotions of the scenes be messy, and to let us play those scenes that way, and bold of Amanda to let her story be represented that way. But I think it felt, I think the rawness gave a kind of, you could really empathize with what they were going through. So it felt important to let the scenes be told that way. And she's an amazing person. I mean, you get a sense of, obviously watching the film, you get a sense of the tremendous endurance and strength it takes, both of body and mind, for these men to go out and do what they do, but also you get an understanding of the incredible endurance and stamina it demands of the families at home, you know, because here's someone who, she loves her husband so much and she wants to support him in what he is, in his calling and what makes him happy, and frankly what, you know, this selfless thing that he's doing, you know, to protect communities. But in doing that and supporting him to get his certification means that he's going to be spending more and more time away in increasingly dangerous circumstances. And that, I think, demands a lot, a tremendous strength. So I was privileged. I felt really privileged to be able to play someone like that.
Well, that strength sort of gives her agency, which then gives her an arc, which then also propels Eric's arc in the story as well, which is kind of a rarity. It turns her into a real character in the story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Josh, you said that you're a volunteer firefighter in Arizona, and this movie meant a lot to you because of that. Did you talk to guys that you work with when you were thinking about the movie? Did you sort of like, I'm thinking about this. What do you guys think?
I mean, other than Joe and just the subject matter, I went back to Tucson, and my really good friend Danny Martin, who I know as Fireman Dan, and my kids know as Fireman Dan. I talked to him for a while, and you know, he knew Eric, and he was at the funeral, and I just wanted his take on it. You know, I wasn't sure. I told you I was reticent, just because if it wasn't treated sensitively and it wasn't treated organically, it's not even the sensitivity, it's organically. I mean, you know, you get into these firefighters' lives and you see how much they rib each other, like what Kitch was talking about, and I wanted to see all that. I wanted to see, you know, a full life as opposed to just kind of microscopically focusing on the tragedy, you know. Yeah. But he said, you know, he was very sweet to me. He just said, I couldn't say no after I talked to him. He just said, you're the only guy that can play this, you're the only guy who should play this, which obviously is not true as an actor, but from his point of view, he's like, you need to play this, you need to represent us. I know how much you're going to give to this. I know how much you're going to lend to stripping everybody down and getting real and make sure that they all have bloody boots and they're all carrying 45-pound packs and 25-pound saws and doing what needs to be done in order to earn our place before we started this movie.
How did you become a volunteer firefighter, if you don't mind me asking?
Illegally.
Is there a black market for volunteer firefighter courses?
I'll give you the number. No, I was working in Tucson, Arizona, and I had met this guy, Danny Martin, and I started spending time. He worked in airport fire in Tucson, and I just liked the gang. I just liked hanging down. You know, it was where I spent the majority of my time, and I didn't hang around with a lot of actors at that point. I just liked firefighters better. They were just more of my ilk at the time, at least, and he started this volunteer firefighting department in Mescal, Arizona, outside of Tucson, and I was the first member. So I was doing things I probably shouldn't have done. I was in fully, you know, inflamed structure fires and training and all that kind of stuff, and then I would go to work the next day.
You'd go act. You'd go get your makeup done and go act. Yeah.
Real bull. But I liked it very much. It resonated wildly with me, and those are friends that I've kept for 30 years. So it was kind of a nice full circle moment. Yeah.
Brennan, when they approached you to do the movie, what gave you confidence that they were going to do the story justice?
I think one of the biggest things was like, hey, can we do this? You know, instead of like, hey, we're going to make this. Right. And that kind of set the tone. And as I got to meet, you know, Mike Menschel, one of the producers, just to see how authentic he was and to see just how much he really wanted to tell the true story of my brothers and how much honor he wanted to bring to them. And then into coming and meeting Joe and just seeing Joe as a director and how intentional he was and how precise he is. And then I've been able to experience a lot of the cast and directors and producers as family, you know, as I've seen them with their wives and their kids, you know, and you really get a sense of who they are, and you couldn't have put together a better group of people to tell the stories. Joe and Josh kind of highlighted and touched on from an outsider looking in, you know, watching filming and seeing how organic it came and seeing how authentic it was in those discussions that they had before, and really capturing the emotions and the characteristics of who my brothers were. Not to sit here and say, oh, well, this line or that line. It was just the feeling that was in place during that time was so powerful to see, filmed, and then to watch it on a big screen come together was just truly tremendous.
Miles, you have a scene in the film. I don't think it's a spoiler because it's based on a true story. But the moment where Brendan was hearing what was happening in the wildfire, and I can't imagine a harder scene to do as an actor, listening to a walkie-talkie and having to respond to the most tragic thing that could possibly happen to this character. Can you talk about what it was like shooting that scene? It's
this horrible scene that you just described. Do you want to talk about filming it? No, yeah. No, I mean, there's the actual, radio call that is online. That's been documented. So we played that, and yeah, man. Then you're just kind of off and running, and I've received, if you're fortunate, I think as an actor, you have some stuff that can, bring you closer to the character for some of these moments, and in my own life, I had received, a pretty terrible phone call. But yeah, I mean, I guess with that scene, the thing that stuck out to me was we had a guy, Alan Sinclair, who was working a hotshot crew, and he was there. He was there the day that Donut came into the parking lot and did that scene. And he afterwards, he just thanked me and gave me just such a long hug. And said, watching me, he said, he's like, he saw himself. He said, that was me that day. And I just kind of, thanked me for it. And, that's what it's about. It's for this community and these guys first and foremost. And then, I think audience is second. But the whole thing was very personal. And we would have little moments like that throughout filming. I think that would just remind us of the story that we were telling.
Well, guys, it's a great script. It's directed wonderfully. The performances are beautiful. It's a great film. Congratulations! It opens this weekend, right? Audiences, go check it out. Guys, give them a round of applause. Only the Brave in theaters
Thank you for having
this
us.
weekend.